we finally got some visuals to show you about how backwards compatibility will perform on... Take two. We finally got some visuals to show you about what backwards compatibility will look like on the Xbox Series X and Series S when you're playing Xbox One games. So we've already spent some time talking about backwards compatibility on this channel, as well as in our video game tech nerd culture podcast, Podcast Revived, which you can find on every podcast service imaginable, and even those only in your dreams. But now we finally have something we can show you. We have some real details. At news.xbox.com, there's this wonderful blog post, which we're going to look at here, and we're going to talk about these details because it's actually pretty interesting. So the first really cool thing here is that they're mentioning backwards compatible games run natively on Xbox S and X, running with the full power of the CPU, GPU, and SSD. No boost mode, no downclocking, the full power of the console for each and every backwards compatible game. That is awesome. So you're going to get these games not just as they were on the old system, but better than they were on your Xbox One. You might actually have a good reason to say, wonder what that game looks like now on this new system. How much better is it going to run? What resolution might it run at now? Backwards compatible titles also benefit from significant reductions in load times due to the massive leap in performance from our custom NVMe SSD at the heart of the Xbox Velocity architecture. So what about games? Let's talk about GTA 5 that takes approximately 3 days to load into the game. Well, now maybe it only takes 1 day. Think of all the time you're going to save not loading into GTA 5. Maybe the coolest thing here is auto HDR for everyone. I don't know what that means. Are they going to make me have a high dynamic range, me as a human? I think maybe what they mean is HDR for every game. Now, newer games, you're seeing a lot more HDR. And if you don't know what that means, it literally just means high dynamic range. And I have this really neat picture here that demonstrates it. But basically, it's going to improve the visual quality without really changing the look of the game. They say HDR images are brighter and more colorful, but only in the naturally expected areas, while the rest of the image retains its original intent. With standard dynamic range versus HDR, how much flatter the other image looks, and the same thing goes here. It just pops more, you know what I mean? It just pops. It just looks better, and you're going to get that on any game you play with backwards compatibility on your Xbox Series X and Series S. Even in these games where HDR was not initially implemented, they're using the power of AI to implement it even in those games. And because of the hardware involved, doing so is not going to impact the performance of the game, the latency of the game. There's no downside to doing this. New technology to double frame rates. I am someone who is very susceptible and perceptive and bothered by frame rates. If a game drops from 60 to 59, I'm going to feel it. If it goes from 30 to 29, I'm going to feel it as well. I'm going to feel it more there, actually. And for games that only ran at 30 on these old consoles, well, guess what? You're going to get to experience them in that buttery smooth 60 FPS. As a PC gamer, that frame rate is so important to me, and I can't really stress enough how much better some of these games are going to feel. They actually have a video here where they're showing, so you can visually see the difference between 30 and 60 FPS. Now, this may not come through on this video because it's a video of a video, but I'll link it in the description down below so that you can see exactly what I mean. All you really need to know is that it's a heck of a lot smoother, and for games that stuttered, that juddered, that lagged, you can say goodbye to that. So there's also something called the Huchi Method, where they had taken games from the, say, the 360 or even the original Xbox that ran at 720p or even 360p in the case of the original Xbox, and they upscaled them to play at 4K on the Xbox One X. The Huchi Method is going to continue to be used in the Xbox Series X for those specific titles, and they're going to be using it to bring some of these titles up to 1440p on the Xbox Series S and full 4K on the Xbox Series X. You have a screenshot of a game here, and you can see how much clearer, how much cleaner these lines are after being upscaled. Look at this person's face down there. It's a muddy mess there. It's a face over here. Improved texture filtering is also coming to backwards compatible titles on both the Series X and S. That makes a pretty big difference. So not only are certain games going to get better frame rates and potentially better resolutions if they featured dynamic resolution on the last gen consoles. Some older retro titles going back to even the original Xbox are going to be playable up-resed to 4K on the Xbox Series X. All in all, they're not just providing backwards compatibility here. They're truly making an experience that's almost equivalent to a remaster. Not a full remake, but you're going to get to play these games in a way, in a capacity, in a visual fidelity that you've never got to experience before. And if you already own the game, it's not going to cost you anything. So how cool is that? I think it's very cool. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments down below. And until the next video, stay nerdy, my friends. If you enjoy my content, please consider becoming a Scary If Literal member. You'll get access to a whole bunch of emoticons to use with live streams and a shout out on an upcoming video. Thanks as always for your continued support.